was that God's shepherding of humanity has existed from the beginning of time, which is not necessarily a shocker if if we're thinking of, and I put a lot of things in Christian terms because I think most people who are watching this probably
Right.
Christian. It's more of what I have a background with too. But if we look at like Genesis and so forth, like God was there at the beginning, right? In whatever fashion, creating the universe and creating humanity. And so there's this idea that God has constantly been shepherding humanity with these prophets or messengers, right? Whether that's Noah or Elijah or Abraham or Moses or Jesus, etc. And if you look at I like to kind of look at like the Old Testament, and you see what I think is a bit of a pattern of people going astray, and then a prophet comes and says, I'm here to put you back on the right track. And then, of course, they go astray again and get them back on the right path. And in the Baha'i faith, that concept of God trying to slowly educate us, the phrase that's often used is progressive revelation.
Okay.
Meaning that God doesn't come to us as like young children and try to teach us like calculus, right? We're not ready to learn calculus. Starts with basic math or something. And then over time, there's been this slow evolution of what's been taught. And I think if you I've heard that talked about in some Christian circles, that there are kind of these different phases of like the time of the law versus the time of grace and some of those kind of concepts I've heard of. That's kind of what the Baha'is are kind of talking about that God has been doing, right? But the key difference is I've been just talking about this topic of progressive revelation only using the Bible, but Baha'u'llah said, no, expand what we're saying here. It's not just Christianity or Judaism or whatever. Expand it to include things like Buddhism and Hinduism.
Okay.
Because those also were brought to humanity at a certain time period for a certain purpose. And those are also part of God's religion. And so what Baha'is often say is that there's one book of religion from God, and there's multiple chapters, and the chapters are things like Hinduism, Judaism, Buddhism, Islam, Christianity,
so it integrates
the Baha'i faith. Yeah, so these are all different chapters within the same book of God, same religion of God. And so Baha'u'llah said that's what's going on, and God has been with humanity from the beginning, been trying to direct us, trying to help us be more mature, so like spiritually and morally mature.
Right.
Which I personally, when I've done some research on humanity in general, I think that's pretty accurate. I mean, things like the world's still a horrible place, don't get me wrong. But if you look at like the progress we've made on things like slavery, some just personal freedoms, women's rights, education, healthcare, those kinds of things, there is a steady trajectory and history of those things improving, right?
Getting better, yeah.
Yeah, none of us would have probably enjoyed things too much 200 years ago. We probably would have been illiterate or a slave or who knows what, right?
Right.
A few hundred years back.
Yeah.
So anyway, there's this view that there's almost a evolutionary path that God has been directing humanity on, and it's going to continue. And the Baha'i faith will not be the last religion. So to your point, there's not another founder of the Baha'i faith, but he definitely said, I'm not the last. This doesn't end. This never ends, in fact.
Right.
This will go on for eternity, for as long as humanity exists.
That's interesting. So it's not a religion that claims that it's the true religion. It's just...
Yeah, that's funny you point that out, because I find that to be a very unique perspective too, because most other religions will say that.